society. Parole board typically says, no, you're not. And the DA's office, the prosecutors who put you in the first place, usually chime in and say, no, they're not, send them back. But even if the parole board finds you suitable, it then goes to the governor. The governor, 9 times out of 10, says, no, send her back to prison. The other route, which is also remote, is to go back to court. The court that sent Debbie to prison in the first place, and say, we want to file a habeas petition. A petition for a writ of habeas corpus, which says something about the way that Debbie was put in prison in the first place wasn't right, and she should be released. So we would file this habeas petition to the court. 9 times out of 10, the court just sends it back, says, nope, you're not getting out. The DA typically chimes in and says, nope, send him back. So it's a pretty bleak process to be able to get out. It's pretty impossible. Now, fortunately for Debbie, and for untold number of women like her, there's a new law that says, hey, if you can provide evidence of abuse, of battering, and you can show that that evidence of battering is related to the reason you were put in prison in the first place, you should be able to present that to the court, and the court, for the first time, should take you seriously. The other thing that the new law says is, if you present that evidence to the parole board has to consider that evidence side by side with what they're supposed to be looking at, which is, has Debbie been a model inmate? And I'm hopeful through what we've been able to document that we should be able to show she is suitable for release, and that's certainly going to be bolstered by the footage that you obtained.
So, here we go. A 6-person film crew, 4 cameras, 8 lights. All of this has been approved to come into the prison. There's a reason why you don't hear about stories like Debbie's. The Department of Corrections in this state and in many states does not allow the media to film the stories of specific inmates. Fortunately, Joshua and Nadia have decided that it's in Debbie's legal interest for her story to be documented, and so I've been brought in as her legal videographer. But that's not what's happening today. Today, we're making a separate documentary about inmates who rehabilitate themselves through various programs at the prison. So there's an arts and crafts program, there's a firefighter training program. We've even filmed the first ever behind bars bat mitzvah. If it happens that Debbie Piegler is involved in some of the activities we film, so be it.
As she's there, since she's been there, she's taking a negative situation and made it into a positive situation.
She works in an electronics manufacturing company. She's one of the highest paid employees in the prison system.
I'm in charge of everything that they build here, including the PC boards, those kits, all the harnesses, transformers, everything they build in here. It's my job to identify those parts, make sure they're accurate, they're correct, and that it ships out on its date.
I met Deborah in prison. I was a heroin addict, in my addiction, really in it. And that's all I knew. And she used to talk to me and talk to me and talk to me. She seen something in me. She told me I would overcome that addiction.
Dear Heavenly Father, we just come together this morning, Father God, thanking you, first of all, waking us up, clothing our right mind, Lord. Father God, we thank you that we have the activities of our limbs, Father God, that we can use our hands and our feet. And we just continue to give you the honor, the glory, and the praise. Father God,
today, I am a drug and alcohol counselor, and I'm about to get my bachelor's degree, and I owe that to Deborah.
She's been a church leader for 15 years. She's taken sign language and actually interprets for the deaf inmates at the church services.
Receiving her associate's degree, Deborah Piegler.
I'm very proud of myself, my tenacity, my resilience. I try to be every day an example, a mentor. I am a tutor of the few of the ladies that are getting ready to take their GEDs and have taken their GEDs. So it's one of the things I really enjoy is helping someone else learn.
She has a lot of wisdom, not from God only, but and I told her I want to go to school, I can't read and write. And she's very intelligent. She is a very smart person, Deborah Piegler is.
I was able to help her learn to read and write and eventually even acquire her GED.
She told me to go to school and they'll take care of me. She told me that God has a plan for my life.
Another thing that Debbie has going for her, at least in theory, for the parole board are the sentiments of Oliver Wilson's family.
I don't believe I'm supposed to identify with her. Somewhere in me, I'm not supposed to accept what has been done. And I'm caught in the catch-22 because maybe I shouldn't even be able to identify with it. Maybe I shouldn't be able to understand it, but I do. And that's a terrible thing, I think, for me to say. If it were not my brother, if it was some man that didn't have a face, that didn't really have a name, but I knew that he was doing these terrible things, then I would say, put me at the head of the fan club. I'd fight for you. I'd do what I could do to get you out.
Debbie has been up for parole. That hearing is very biased in favor of the prosecution.
I went before the parole board, and here I sat as Oliver's sister, and in my mind, the closest one to him by way of age and growing up together. I poured my heart out to these people, and after pouring my heart out, they still said no and refused to let Debbie go.
It seems to me that they should have taken the family's opinion into consideration. Enough is enough. She's served a life. She doesn't have to suffer anymore, as far as I'm concerned.
She has been denied 3 separate times.
I've met parole board battered women's investigators, and why they can't find out the things that we find out so easily is a mystery to me. They have all the powers to go do that, and yet they seem to not see some of the obvious things. It feels like they're trying to find reasons to deny it rather than trying to find reasons to support information that may be readily available.
So until parole board acknowledges that she was a battered woman, she was abused, she's never gonna get out.
She winds up leaving that parole hearing just in disbelief and not knowing where to turn.
If life happens to deliver a situation to you that you cannot handle, do not attempt to resolve it. Kindly put it in the something for God to do box. Amen. Initially, it was always, I hope my mom is doing okay, and I wish she can come home and be with me. And then, as I got older, it was like, well, thank you, Jesus, that I have her to talk to on the phone, At least she's there for me in some other way,
Despite being behind bars, Debbie has really done everything in her power to be a good mother to both of her daughters. Her older daughter, Takesha, who's currently serving with the Air Force in the Iraq War, and her younger daughter, Natasha, whose father was Oliver Wilson.
My relationship with my mom is very, very, very good. I think due to the circumstances, it's the best that it can be. It's hard because I tried to have such a strong relationship with her, but you can't. If I had to compare my mom's and my dad's loss to figure out which one is harder, it's my mom, because it's an everyday pain you're dealing with. It's an everyday thing. It's constant. It's not something that, oh, he died, let's grieve and move on. It's a grieving process that never ends.
Seek me and you shall find they're gonna give you a hard time. been waiting my whole life for someone to make it right.
Debbie's case has been almost a full-time job in addition to our regular legal practice. This is a private law office. This is not what we normally do. We do land use, real estate, development law. If you come to me, I can get you zoned to be an airport if that's what you want. But I don't represent inmates, people charged with crimes, criminals. This is a whole new experience for us.
Joshua and I were almost paralyzed at the beginning of this case. How do you go about finding hospital records, police records, witnesses from 25 years ago? But then I realized that Debbie is in fact the key to this case, because as soon as you meet Debbie, you want to help her and you want to be involved in getting her out of prison. And that's how we got Bobby.
Bobby Buechler, Debbie Piegler's investigator, and we spoke a few days ago. I'm in LA. We're all really different people. Nadia, she's this long-distance runner. Joshua's this Orthodox Jew. And I'm the old man of the group, I would say. I've been an investigator for approximately 25 years. Also, I've worked as a journalist for New York Times, Vanity Fair, CBS Evening News, 60 Minutes, but primarily I'm a private investigator.
Before we hired Bobby, we had a couple of other investigators on the case who were unable to find anything. We got Bobby. Within 24 hours, documents started flowing in, and from those documents, we began to get a sense of the real deficiencies in the DA's case.
We had heard from Debbie for a long time that Takesha may have been molested by Oliver, but we were shocked when we learned that there was actual evidence of this in the police report that had been ignored. For so long, this killing had been framed as simply about life insurance proceeds, and to learn that the police knew also that he may have molested her was obviously very disturbing to us.
We knew that we had to talk to Takesha about the alleged abuse. So when she was rotated back to the United States in between tours of duty, we went to see her.
I sat with Takesha and asked her the very difficult question of whether she recalled Oliver ever molesting her. And she just looked off into the distance and tears welled up in her eyes. And then she shared with me very vivid recollections of what Oliver had done in terms of abuse to her as a young child.
The hearing transcript from Debbie's preliminary hearing in 1983 shows that the prosecution had only one witness.
The judge characterized this witness's testimony as pretty poor and, quote, extremely ambiguous.
What was fishy about this guy who called in Oliver Wilson's murder to the police was that he was initially only identified as Dead Man, which is a pretty weird name. We subsequently found out that this was a nickname because he used to drive dead bodies for the county coroner.
He was a drug customer of Oliver's. He was a friend of Oliver's.
But he waited many months to contact the police to tell them what he claimed he knew about the murder of Oliver Wilson. So when Bobby tracked him down and found him, he was in and out of the hospital with a life-threatening illness, and we thought, what better time to confront him and say, what's the truth?
I have cancer now. I don't know how much time I have left. So I just want the truth to be known. Debbie deserves to be free. She deserves the truth to be known. I never volunteered that she was being beat up, where he had her whooping her with that bull whip. Didn't let her answer the door, wouldn't open the door for nobody, So it was rough for her, And I know if that was rough for her and in there for 20-some years, her whole life is destroyed, man.
The other thing that we began to get from Tony was an explanation as to why he waited so long to contact the police. And apparently, for all the years that Debbie and Oliver were together, Tony had been deeply and secretly in love with Debbie.
Debbie was a beautiful, beautiful girl. I really loved her. I fell for her, like Kennedy fell for Marilyn Monroe did.
I didn't even think he even liked me like that, because I knew he had a wife. He had a wife and children.
Tony was trying to court Debbie. He wanted to be with her. But now that she was free of Oliver, Debbie went back to Takesha's father.
I got jealous and I told everything. Ripped my heart apart, so I ripped her heart apart. I called sheriffs, homicide. I told them everything that I knew, and I might have added something to it, and I had it. I tell you, whatever I told them, it worked because they had her within 2 days.
As bad as it was, what Tony did, what was even worse was for the DA to know that he was lying and put him on the stand anyway.
When he heard that they were going to prosecute Debbie for the death penalty, he tried to back out, but the DA wouldn't let him. In fact, he was arrested, and he was told that unless he testified against Debbie Piegler, they would vigorously prosecute him for an old felony charge that had basically been dormant.
They kept pushing, they wanted me to say that Deborah told me after Oliver was killed that she had pre-planned for him to be killed, that it was a murder for hire. And no, it wasn't. The regret is mostly that I didn't think about her being beat up, held hostage, being a hoe. You know, I didn't look at all that, of what she was going through. But I did it, and I had to live with it.
I believe a tremendous injustice has occurred.
David Guthman is a recently retired prosecutor from the LA DA's office. And while he didn't have anything to do with Debbie's prosecution, he has significant experience in prosecuting death penalty cases in that office. So we gathered our materials up, showed them to him, and we asked him,
Was Deborah's level of culpability truly reflected with a conviction of first-degree murder? Absolutely not.
in evaluating Debbie's case, David Guthman went to speak to the prosecutor at the LA DA's office, who's in charge of the parole unit that has custody of Debbie's file.
He said, come down and I'll let you look at the file. When I actually met with the prosecutor, he said, I can't let you look at the file, but I can tell you what's in the file. In the file was a memo, typically referred to as an alibi memo.
An alibi memo is actually the prosecutor's own alibi as to why they're not pursuing the death penalty, where they had attempted to get the death penalty and where they'd gotten approval for the death penalty from higher-ups in the DA's office. So it was shocking to us to discover that there was this alibi memo saying that the DA couldn't and shouldn't seek the death penalty because the DA did seek the death penalty. They threatened Debbie with the death penalty, and it was because of the death penalty threat that she took a plea to life in prison.
I'm sitting there hopefully with a poker face, realizing that that memo was dynamite. And when I left that meeting, I immediately called Deborah's attorneys and told them what was contained in that memo.
So according to David Guthman, this memo says way back in 1983, the DA's office had concluded that Oliver Wilson had molested Debbie's daughter, which is something we'd suspected but have never been able to prove. The DA's office concluded that Debbie's motivation wasn't financial gain, which was their whole basis for prosecution back then. And the memo concludes that they had, quote, veracity concerns with the witness or witnesses required to prosecute Debbie. So back in 1983, they didn't even have a case against her. They had no evidence. So going into this big meeting with Steve Cooley and his top brass today, where we have all this documentation that Debbie was battered, I'm feeling really confident that this is gonna move them to do the right thing.
Getting the prosecutors to agree that Debbie should be released did not happen overnight. It took more than 3 years to get them to see the light. And it was at that time that we were able to walk into that prison and give Debbie that letter. Hello, Miss Deborah.
Hi. Oh, good to see you. Hi, Joshua.
You knew we were coming, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
We have bad news and we have good news. The bad news is you've apparently been incarcerated illegally. The good news is the DA has agreed that your crime was voluntary manslaughter, which means your maximum sentence would have been 6 years under the guideline, the penal code section that was in effect at the time. We're going to work with you, explain what it means, what the next steps are, and how we feel.
So this is from the LA District Attorney's Office. You presented significant issues and evidence which were unknown or unavailable at the time of trial. Once the matter has been returned to the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles Superior Court, this office would be willing to offer a plea to 1 count of voluntary manslaughter in violation of Penal Code Section 192A, with credit for the years of imprisonment served thus far. Such disposition satisfies our office policy of requiring a plea to the charge which most accurately describes the defendant's criminal conduct. In context, it also serves the interests of justice.
Oh my God. This is really happening. It's like you knew it could happen, but it's really happening.
I remember reading it, tears coming in my eyes, and it was just this overwhelming sense of relief that we are finally helping Debbie unlock that gate.
Oh my goodness. I still can't. I'm so ecstatically happy, but I'm so trying to contain it because I so just want to just scream and run around the building.
When she told me that, I was like, finally, God, you answered my prayers. This is what I really, really needed in my life. And I know that's what she's been praying for and hoping for all these years. So it was just a sigh of relief.
It was just almost too much to take in at one time because it was just so unbelievable that my sister is finally coming home.
I had absolute faith that that letter meant the DA would do the right thing and that we would see our client released, very shortly. I had no doubt that it would happen.
We filed our habeas petition based on that deal, and a few weeks after filing our habeas petition, we received a letter from someone in the district attorney's office that we'd never met before saying the deal is hereby withdrawn.
God, it's so disheartening to have this letter and then someone else come along and says, oh, that letter means nothing. Yeah. And someone that really doesn't have the authority or the power to say that. I don't get how that happened.
Our case has seriously called into question the judgment of District Attorney Steve Cooley. He broke a written plea agreement with us in order to instead align himself with prosecutors who have a well-established record of misconduct.
And while we don't know exactly what happened in the LA District Attorney's Office, we do have several indicators.
One is the DA's office asked us to have Debbie waive all her claims against LA County because they knew of all the misconduct the DA's office had been involved in. We declined to do that.
And there is a woman named Lael Rubin, who is the head